Welcome to the new podcast, A Mick, a Mook, and a Mike, hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer Frank Pace, with retired New York City firefighter and Vietnam vet Billy O'Connor.
The man, Vinny Hookers.
How you doing, my partner?
My brother, how are you? How you doing today? Back in the studio. It's nice, huh?
Yeah, it's really nice. I'm really appreciative of being here and all the fine work Derek is doing to get us on the air.
Yeah, Lord knows there's a lot of wire floating around here. Is right.
There's a lot of wires floating around here.
I'd hate to be tracing this thing back. It's like fishing line. There's so much of it out there.
Yeah, I don't even want to do a reverse because every time I walk in here, I get scared.
Now you're the talent, Frank. Now you're the talent. You don't have to say you're behind the scenes. You are the man up front. You are the guy.
Yeah, well, you know what talent I wish I was? I wish I was a sports celebrity or a movie star because the money they're throwing at these people these days. What did Fernando Tatis made $450 million to sign with the Padres for 10 years? That's $45 million a year. What are some of the basketball players making? I mean, they're crazy. It's like $30 million a year guaranteed.
Yeah, I saw some stuff about A-Rod or something. They would go and buy his at bat. He was getting like something like $70,000 every time he got up to play.
Well, that's not what he was getting paid. That's what he was earning every time that's what it worked out to.
Remarkable.
It's remarkable. Some guys, they'll make $1 million a win.
What'd you tell me Rod signed for its first year?
Well, he made $7,500. Rod Carew made $7,500 his first year, and he was rookie of the year, and he got his raised. He was raised to $9,000. Now, my other friend Johnny Bench takes issue with that story because he was up a year before Rod, and he said the major league minimum in 1967 was $9,000 a year. So maybe Rod was a little bit confused. Maybe he got $9,000 and got it raised to $10,500. But it's crazy. It's crazy.
Nuts. Money. I mean, Willie Mays, to me, is still the greatest player I ever saw. $100,000. He was making $100,000 a year, maybe.
Yeah, and he was holding out until Mickey Mantle signed because he wanted to make $101,000 instead of. Yep.
But I mean, these guys.
To the mic.
I'm sorry. Yeah, these guys, I was even reading about, as a matter of fact, we talk about it in the book, Lamar's Gamble, about the amount of money that was being initially in the NFL, which was nothing. They made so much noise about Namath. When Namath signed for $400,000 for 4 years and the Cadillac they threw in, everybody said there's nobody in the world worth that kind of money.
Yeah.
Right now, I know there's second string tackles for the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't even know their name. They're making $3.5 million a year.
At least.
Yeah, crazy.
At least. It's crazy.
Well, my pushback would be if they are making that type of money.
The owners are making it too.
Exactly. Who's paying it? Yes.
Yeah, and TV is paying it. The same thing with the recently completed NCAA championships. The NCAA athletes are correct. They're not getting anything out of this, and they're making billions of dollars, and the NCAA is making billions of dollars. I don't know the solution, because if you're an athlete and you want to get money, you have to be in an income producing sport. But then if you're in a non-revenue producing sport like soccer, like volleyball, like even baseball, what are you going to pay them? So it's around.
I think the answer is pensions.
Well,
pensions for the college athletes, you mean?
Yeah, I think they should give them pensions.
There should be some kind of, I don't know. Look, I have no answers to it, especially when it comes to economics. But I would think there would have to be some kind of socialism involved, where if the football players are going to get money, it's got to get dispersed equally among all the players in the league.
I would think so, but smarter minds than me are trying to come up with that answer. So let me.
Well, before we leave the subject,
okay.
Didn't the NFL just sign a contract for like $100 billion or something?
Yeah, but those are professional players.
Yeah, but I mean,
so those players are getting the money.
Yeah, but just
I'm talking about the amateur players.
The difference of when we wrote what the NFL was looking to get initially to get on television with ABC and NBC and CBS. Now, $100 billion?
That's crazy. It's crazy.
It's insane.
It's crazy. Anyway, Billy, before we forget, our guest today is Grant Rosenberg. writer, producer, and author of the new book, Gideon, which is available on Amazon.com.
Oh, that's great, Frank. I'm really looking forward to it.
Good. So let's talk about something you know a little bit better than Derek or I. And I apologize to the audience in advance, but what's the craziest thing you ever talked to about with a hooker? And how?
Why is it always me, Lord? Look at this face. Look at this baby face. Look at the innocence. The innocence in these eyes. You know, it's not just with hookers. It's with older people.
Let's qualify this. How many hookers have you think you've spoken to in your life?
In my lifetime?
Yeah,
well, just a Bangkok alone. I was there a year and I was 19. I was a recovering Catholic. I spoke to everyone I could. I probably spoke to 1,000 hookers at least. But I didn't ask them the same question.
In a year?
Yeah, in a year.
Okay.
So 3 a day, that's not that much.
3 a day, what's 52? 3 a day.
3 a day over a year, that's over 1,000, right? I was a kid. I was young. You know, I was 3 a day doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
I guess you didn't take off weekends.
No, I mean, why would you take off? But let me just qualify. I used to sit, and this is true as God. I have a question. I mean, a standard question. With old timers, I'd be 22 years old. I'd be sitting in a bar drinking at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd see this guy 85 years old next to me. And the first thing I'd ask him is, wow, you know, you've been around. I was 25, so we're talking 60. This is 110 years ago. And I'd ask this guy, what is the worst thing that ever happened to you? And invariably, if I was in the United States, the old man would say the worst time in my life was the Depression. And if I was in Europe, the 100% of the time, the same answer would be World War II, World War II. But I always ask the worst. So when I meet hookers, I always ask a hooker, I got to ask you, how long you been in this business? 15 years, 10 years? What's the strangest thing anybody ever asked you for? Because, I mean, it interests me, you know, because
you're a sick fuck. That's why it interests you, because you're a sick fuck.
I'm not a sick fuck.
Yes, you are.
It's all in the eye of the beholder. But, I mean, look, I don't care sexually what goes on behind closed doors. I mean, it's no difference to me. I don't care what anybody. I don't care if a guy sits in a bathtub, lays farts, and bites the bubbles. I don't care. Whatever gets him off is okay with me. I don't care. But I always ask, inevitably, I'd ask a hooker, what's the strangest thing anybody's ever asked you for? And I was in South Carolina, and my buddy Ron Byers had got thrown out of the Air Force, and he had hookers working for him. One of these girls' name was Lynn. And I never was with Lynn or anything, but I always asked her when I used to see her, so tell me, what's the strangest thing anybody ever? She told me, there's a guy, now get this, he used to come in every Thursday, she said, and he comes in with a crate of oranges. And all he wants to do, he pays $500, and he stands up against the wall and masturbates while us girls throw oranges at him, right? I said, that's the craziest thing I ever heard of. I said, really? She goes, not only that, all the other girls say, he's here. And they all go in, and there's like 6 of us pelting this guy with oranges while he's, you know, yanking his crank. So I said, that's remarkable. But what really gets me, Frank and Derek, what gets me is, how did this guy find this out, that this is what it does? I mean,
he tried pears,
yeah.
He tried apples.
Did he start off with pineapples?
He tried grapefruits.
This ain't working. we gotta go with something softer, oranges. You know, I mean, how do you find out that this is your thing? How many different experiments do you got to go through? That's what gets me.
Oh, that's pretty funny. We had an assistant on head of the class. I think her name was Faith. But she was a very famous wannabe celebrity hanger-on, and she wrote a lot of books about it. And she recently made a comeback, and her comeback story was, one of the things she talked about was George Harrison of the Beatles was a serial screwer, and you say 3 a day. she says he could do 8 a day, and often did. Be with
George Harrison.
8 women a day, and he often did.
Wow.
That'll give you something in your next life to aspire to beat.
Well, I'll never be able to handle that. 8 a day, George Harrison. Man, God, take your hat off to him, huh?
Yeah, no wonder why this
Living
guitar,
in a material world.
his guitar never wept.
Yeah. I can see why it would never weep. That's amazing.
Yeah.
8 a day. I know that Wilt Chamberlain famously bragged about
20,000.
being with
20,000 women.
20,000 women. Yeah.
And in his house on Coldwater Canyon, on the top of Coldwater Canyon, he had a bedroom that the ceiling opened up on so he could see the stars at night. And he said, see the Big Dipper? That's what they called me.
Oh, I can imagine he was the Big Dipper, all right. Yeah. I'd say he'd be rather intimidating for a woman, you know?
Yeah. Hey, so Billy, why don't you tell me a good fireman story?
Let me see if I can think of one. I mean, you know what? When Combustible comes out, there's a lot of good fireman gags in there. But
Hit that corner.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing.
hit that corner.
And move that mic closer to you.
Move the mic closer. Hit the mic. Hit the mook. Drink the water. Okay, I'll give you one. There was a guy in our firehouse, and firemen are not traditionally vain. You know what I mean? We're really not. You don't get a lot of, if you get a guy who's like concerned about his looks, they're going to break his chops. They're going to eat him alive. But we had a guy, Tony the Toop, we used to call him. Tony the Toop. Now, Tony was a nice enough guy, and he was a good fireman, and he worked in our house for about 6 or 7 years, but he was bald as a baby's ass, I mean, just not a hair on his head. And of course, whatever little it did have, he shaved. So one day he comes into the firehouse. Now, you've heard me tell many stories about how the firemen are all ball breakers, and especially in the busy houses, they're up all night. All they do is break balls. He comes in one night and he's got this thick rug on, like a real cheap rug. It looked like it was made out of his wife's back hairs. It was like real cheap jet black rug. Now, everybody knows we've been working with this guy for 6 years and he's bald as an egg, right? So naturally, guys, look at Tony's got this fucking rug. We're taking off his, throwing a pitcher of beer, they're throwing it in the soup. They're breaking his chops. But he refuses not to come to work wearing this rug. So one night we're working, and I was the roof man, and he was the OV man, which is the outside vent. Now, which that means is on a tenement fire, we team up, and we go to the floor above the fire where all the gases and the smoke is, force the door, and make a search. So it was about 2:30 in the morning. We get a call on the 18th floor. There's a fire on the 18th floor. So we go, me and Toop, Tony the Toupee. And me and the Toop go walking up. And as on the way up, I get a call on the radio that there's a guy trapped in the back window, the bedroom on the 19th floor, which is where we're going. The fire's on the 18th floor, but this guy's trapped on the 19th because all the smoke and flames are coming up, and he's yelling out the window for help. So we hurry up. We get up to the 19th floor. We force the door. As soon as we force the door, there's nothing but smoke. Right down to our knees, on our bellies, we're crawling in. Sure enough, we're feeling our way. I get to the back bedroom, and sure enough, this guy's outside the window. So I take off my mask, and I look this guy right in the eye and I said, listen, whoa, hey, relax. I said, relax. We're here. We got you. You're going to be fine. I says, there's 10 cents worth of fire out there. It's all smoke. We're going to take you right through the apartment door, right out to the hallway. You're going to be fine. We came in. We're going out. Don't worry about nothing. Just relax. I said, my partner is going to share his mask with you. The main thing is don't panic. The guy goes, okay. Okay, I'm fine, right? So I get the guy calmed down. As soon as we come into the apartment, Tony takes his mask and he puts it in the guy's face, and the guy freaks out. He's pushing Tony. He's screaming out. So me and Tony are actually like wrestling this guy, through the bedroom, into the hallway, into the living room. We get him out to the hallway. I take him into the hallway. I take the mask off. I go to work on the guy. I'm going to start giving him mouth to mouth. And I go down to work on him. I say, wait a minute. I look up at Tony. I said, I don't remember this guy having a beard. And Tony's bald as a baby's ass, and his rug got caught in the basket. We almost strangled the poor bastard. No wonder the guy freaked out. Tony never wore his rug to work anymore after that.
That's pretty funny. It reminds me of a story similar, but not nearly as funny. You heard me talk about Marty Nedboy a few times.
Mm-hmm.
He was an old Jew, 65 years old or so, and I've often said the first three guys I hired on any show were Wallenberg, the dwarf, and Marty. So Marty was on a show, I don't know, in early 90s for me, and he is a polio victim, but he was the funniest guy in the world, and he was as funny as the day was long. And anyway, the president of Warner Brothers was a fellow by the name of Harvey Shepard. Now, Harvey was immaculately dressed, suit and tie every day, but he in his vanity, he wore a toupee, but not a glorious toupee, a $2 rug.
Yeah, cheap rug.
A cheap rug. And whenever Harvey would walk on the set, everybody was, very quiet and respectful, except for Marty, because Marty didn't give a shit. And he would always walk behind him and go, with his hand,
I love it.
He was really funny. Anyway, with that, we've killed enough time. Why don't we get to our guest, Grant Rosenberg? And Derek, can you bring him on?
Okay, guys, we got Grant in.
Hey, there he is, Grant Rosenberg. How are you, Grant?
Great. How are you guys? Good to see you.
Great to meet you, Grant. Billy O'Connor here. Real pleasure to know you.
And that's the third
Billy,
man.
you too.
And that's
Billy,
the third.
I read your book with my mouth agape the entire time.
That must have been Confessions of a Bronx Bookie.
Yes.
So one critic had told me, boy, you had a lot to confess. I don't know how true, but it's funny when my other bookmaking partner told me, why did you hold back? Why did you put it all in there? I said, well, because, my daughters might read this one day. And other people have told me, you really do all that stuff? And I said, I held back. I didn't want to put it in there.
It's funny you should say that. When I wrote my book, one of the things that I had in mind was that my 85-year-old mother-in-law was going to read it.
I got to ask you, I read your book and I enjoyed it, by the way. Really good novel and a real interesting twist in the middle of the book, which I don't want to give away because I recommend anybody going out there and buying Gideon and reading it. But I was just talking to Frank and he had read the book too, of course, and liked it. But we were both kind of trying to remember the significance of the title. I love the title Gideon. I love it. And I want to know what drove you to pick that particular title.
Well, having read the book, you know that the lead character is someone who breaks the law, and hence he has to have a code name, if you will. And I was looking around, and I wasn't necessarily looking for something biblical, but I ended up finding something biblical because Gideon is, among other things in the Bible, sort of the enforcer.
Okay.
This is who our Gideon is in the book.
Okay. I knew there was some significance to the name, and I mentioned it to Frank. I says, I don't really know the significance of Gideon. I didn't know it was biblical, but I knew there was something more. It was like Shakespeare when he did The Tempest, and he named one of his characters Miranda, because she had the vision, and I said, there's something about this title. I said that I love the title because it's ambiguous. It's nebulous, I should say.
Well, you always write what you know. That's what Billy says he was told in the University of Florida journalism school, which he went to at the age of 58 years old. But you write about San Francisco. You grew up there, and they have a lot of great restaurants and everything. So as Billy likes to write what everybody's wearing, you were very descriptive on the restaurants and food. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, grew up in San Francisco. I consider it my hometown, even though I moved away in the early 70s to make my fortunes in Los Angeles as a page at NBC. Um, but I've always it's always had a warm place in my heart. And what I like about what I liked about writing the book and setting it there was to people who are familiar with the Bay Area and people who are familiar with San Francisco will find touch points in it and say, oh, I recognize that, or I recognize this. But people who aren't familiar with San Francisco can still get a sense of what the city is about, and how it's a melting pot and how it's financially diverse. And Frank, you mentioned food because you know that I love to cook, and so that I think it just sort of helps round out the overall feeling of the characters if you sort of give a description of what they're eating and what they're drinking without making it into a travel log.
Yeah, of course. You don't want to make it into a travel log, but I get what you're saying, because when you read the book, you do talk about food in the book, quite a bit. You touch on it, which is, and you know what you're talking about, because when you read it, you know that the person.
But Grant has written 2 cookbooks that he just distributes to his friends. So we've got 2 large notebooks full of Grant's recipes and everything, and it's terrific.
Well, I'm Irish, so I wouldn't really write a cookbook.
We boil potatoes.
We boil roast beef. We boil everything.
Just as a little diversion, you mentioned something, Frank, and I know that Billy went to Florida and studied at a late age, which I give him the greatest amount of admiration for. But when I was an executive at Paramount, I was working with a writer by the name of Ronald Cohen, who is a terrific writer, grew up on the wrong side of Chicago, I guess you could say. And I remember he told me, I said to him at one point that I would like to get out of being an executive and become a writer. And he said, you know what, you're never going to be a good writer. And I said, why is that? And he said, because your life has been too easy. You haven't suffered enough to understand how to become a good writer. And it's always stuck with me. I never, of course, embraced that, because I believe that, being a writer, like being an actor, it's a gift that you have, that you can learn how to create things. But that resonance has always struck me, that living a tough life does give you a certain leg up when you're describing emotions, when you're describing pain, when you're describing sorrow, when you're describing tough times. Because for me, I've been fortunate that hasn't been my life. And going back to Billy's book for just a second, he wrote about what he knew and what he experienced, which is
yeah, I write about Irish drunks. I mean, it'd be kind of ridiculous for me to write about, the experience of being black in Detroit. I don't want to think about being black in Detroit. I write about what I know, Irish drunks. But I got to get back to what you said just before about suffering. Of course, to me, my life has been a ball. I mean, I didn't look at his suffering, but Hemingway famously said, God help the writer who didn't have a war to go to. So he's in your camp, he believes that you have to suffer to write. But
I want to interject one thing. We used to say you remembered something that the fellow said to you. I was on the first movie I ever worked on was A Winner Never Quits. It was a Pete Gray story of a one-armed baseball player who played for the St. Louis Browns in 1944. We had, again, our DP, director of photography, was Joe Byrock, who was ancient at that time, and Joe Byrock had worked on It's a Wonderful Life. Well, his assistant cameraman was also, in his 70s, which now doesn't seem that old. But then he said to me, you're a really terrific young fellow, but you'll never make it in this business. And I said, why? And of all things, he said, you're too nice. And that's something I've really been confused with being too nice.
Well, nice guys don't always finish last.
Yeah, exactly. But again, get back to when you talk about the food aspect of Gideon, and it is entertaining because you give an idea about the city of San Francisco and you write about what you know. But Ian Fleming said that, like Jackie Gleason famously said when he did The Honeymooners, there's nothing funny about rich. Being poor is funny. So that's why Ian Fleming once said, if you're going to write, write about food, write about drink, write about the best. Always write about good food, good dining, good booze. That was his thing, and I guess good food. You're
Along the same lines, when you write, fiction, you want to write about not about romance. You want to write about great romance. When you write about pain, you want to write about intense pain. I mean, you want to take everything to its logical limit to have the biggest impact. At least I think so.
Well, Dickens, just a real quick quote from Dickens to follow up on what you just said. Dickens is famous for his characters, and he said, if you want your character to be remembered, give him a wart right at the tip of his nose. Meaning make your characters unforgettable. And you did that in your book, by the way. You did a great job. I really enjoyed the book.
I often say that in order for a TV series to be successful, you have to either see yourself in the series, or it's got to be aspirational. You have to see people you aspire to be. And I've pretty much found that, Cheers, people we would want to be with.
Sure.
Friends, people you'd want to be. A lot of those held true for me, at least.
Well, there's no question about it. When I was, we may be a little off topic, but I think when I first started in the business, I was in the research department at NBC, and we used to do all kinds of audience testing. And really what audiences wanted was to invite a friend to come over to their house every Wednesday at 8 o'clock or every Tuesday at 9, whatever it was. It was, appointment TV. They wanted Jim Rockford to be their friend. So you're 100% right. I mean, I know the television has changed over the years, but you still want to be with somebody that you want to watch, somebody that you want to hang with.
Well, you helped me make the transition, because I was just going to ask you, why don't you take us a little bit through your career?
The basic overview, if you will, is started at NBC as a page, made it into the research department, and that catapulted me, if you will, over to Paramount. And I worked in the research department at Paramount for a couple of years, but was never meant to do research. Never really liked doing research. The advantage that it gave me was not only an understanding of what worked and what didn't, but it also put me very, very close with Michael Eisner, because I was doing feature marketing research, and I used to fly all over the country with him to do movie previews. And so we
By the way,
chat.
you were on a jet, private jet, right? You didn't fly commercial.
I flew commercial sometimes, but generally after the preview, and I would collect the cards, and Eisner and Diller would grab me and say, get your cards and get your suitcase, and we're flying back home so you can tell us the results of the test. So yeah, it was the Paramount 4-seater. Sometimes it was a little uncomfortable when I had to give them the results of the test if they weren't particularly positive. And Michael and Barry didn't always see eye to eye about the movies that we were putting out as well. So sometimes I wish I was on a commercial plane sitting in.
How old were you at this time, Grant, when you were flying around the country previewing movies?
24.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, I found out that my wife at the time was having twins on my way to the airport to go to Austin, Texas. So by the time I landed in Austin, I don't think I could see very straight. I kept the waitress very busy bringing cocktails. But I left the research department, went into television development, and then I worked under Gary Nardino.
And why don't you explain to Billy, Derek, and the people that are viewing this what television development is?
Oh, of course. I don't mean to rush through here.
No, not at all, man. You've been great. Just
so at Paramount, television development is working with writers and producers who we have mostly under contract. We have a stable of writers, both comedy and drama. And as a studio executive, you are the conduit between your writers and producers and the networks.
And
back
this
in
is
those,
before a show gets picked up.
that is correct. And back in those days, there were just 3 networks to sell to. So either I would generate ideas, or most often the writers and producers would generate ideas, bring them into me, and the ones that we liked, we would flesh out, and then take them into one of the 3 networks and try to sell them. And if we were lucky, we would get a script commitment, and the writers would go away and write a pilot script. And then the next stage was, if we were very lucky, we would get a pilot order, which means that script would then be shot. Excuse me one second. And then we would be vying for one of the slots on their fall schedule.
So let me ask you, how many pitches do you think would go to the networks combined each year? How many pilot scripts would you get? How many pilot orders would you get? And how many series orders would you get out of the first 1,000 or so that you were pitched?
Okay, so, well, back in those days, the 3 networks, they probably took, let's just, to make the math easy, let's say they took 1,000 pitches. They probably took more than that. And of those 1,000 pitches, they probably ordered about 40, maybe 50 scripts at each network. So about a little more than 10% of the pitches were picked up for a script. And then of those, probably about 10% again were commissioned to shoot a pilot.
Wow.
And in the drama side, the pilots could be 60 or 90 minutes long. Occasionally, they would order a 2-hour movie, because if the pilot busted, which means not going to series, they could at least run it off as a 2-hour movie and generate some income from it. And the half-hour pilots, as Frank very well knows, were half-hour long for sitcoms. And then I would say they put on, each network maybe put on 7 to 10 new shows a year.
So from thousands down to 7.
Thousands down to 7. So those are
Show
quite
you
some
the odds.
odds.
That shows you the odds.
Yep.
Well, and to exacerbate the bad math, you don't really generate a lot of income until your show hits syndication, and that's
Year 5.
Days 100 episodes, so 4 seasons.
Yep.
So if someone comes into my office to pitch something with high hopes of buying a Malibu beach house,
Yeah.
Well, now, Grant,
Yeah.
I'm going to say that you can make a lot of money, relatively speaking, a lot of money just being executive producer on a series that runs 2 or 3 years, because sometimes those guys make $40,000 an episode. That's $800,000 a year times 4 or 5 years. That's pretty good money.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, if you get on a show, you've done well. I mean, you don't have to, if you own the show, if you're the Charles Brothers, if you're Gary Goldberg, if you're, if Steve Bochco, if you own the show, then that's a whole different realm. But yeah, the odds are slim.
The odds are slim.
The odds are slim. But as a layman, let me ask both of you. It's the syndication that's the money, right? That's where you want to be. You want to be like on networks all across the country and in syndication. Is that the deal?
Well, now I think it's correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's more streaming now than syndication.
I believe you're correct. Yeah. In the old days of syndication, it's changed so much just because of the multitude of platforms right now. It's just so confusing. I mean, back when I was at Paramount, we got a show on the air that was canceled with a 35 share, I think, which means 35% of the people who were watching television were watching that show. And now successful shows on the networks, on the 4 major networks, if they do an 11 share, it's a huge success.
Wow.
I want to tell you,
everywhere.
I want to tell you, my friend Barry Halley, our friend Barry
Yes.
Halley, we were in a meeting the other day, and somebody was congratulating somebody on a 0.5 in the demo. And that's how far.
So 0.5 out of 100% of the people that had their televisions on were watching this show, and they considered it a victory.
In a specific demo.
And they considered it a victory.
In the 18 to 35 demo,
Gotcha.
0.5 of the people were watching that. Like Grant said, we got canceled with Head of the Class in year 5 because we did a 27 share. Well, those days are gone. So tell me about Gary Nardino. He was AKA in the terms of Larry Little, the Fat Man.
Yes, he was an outsized character, both in all ways. He came from the agencies in New York. He was a very colorful character and heavy partier and strong executive. Not creativity was not his forte. It was his salesmanship. And when we were at Paramount, we owned ABC.
And Gary's position at Paramount was what? President
of television.
President of television.
Right. And we had Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, Taxi. We owned ABC. And
metaphorically, you're speaking.
Oh, yes, correct.
Yeah.
And as a result, the folks at ABC didn't much care for Gary Nardino because he threw his weight around, metaphorically.
Considerably. Considerably.
But he wielded a pretty strong hammer because we had, I think, 5 of their top 7 shows or something like that. Not only that, but as the shows got picked up, as Happy Days got picked up for season 8, season 9, they kept giving the actors, specifically Ronnie and Henry Winkler, commitments, as well as increased salary. They would give them commitments for pilots, commitments for series.
And Henry turned one of those commitments into MacGyver.
That's correct.
Which is still making money today.
That's Henry Winkler's project? I didn't know
Henry Winkler was the executive producer on MacGyver.
Can I tell you my MacGyver story?
Please.
So
we'll get back to Nardino in a second, but tell us your MacGyver story.
But this is a classic. So we've got a writer on the Paramount lot named Lee Zlotoff, and he comes up with an idea to do a show in real time, which is that you're just going to be watching something for 55 minutes that takes 55 minutes in a day. So to accomplish that stupid idea, I mean, it was a novel idea, but to accomplish it, the character had to be a character who knew shortcuts, who could get from place A to place B and knew all these ways to manipulate household things and to make them into different things. Anyway, we pitched the idea to Henry, and Henry said, I like the idea, but I don't think it really works. A long story short, this part of the story, it morphed into MacGyver. So we pitched it at ABC, and we used one of Henry's commitments to get a script commitment. And then they liked the script, and then we got a commitment for a 90-minute pilot. We shot the pilot, and it was extremely unsuccessful. And we screened it at ABC, and it was Henry Winkler and John Rich. Frank, if you remember John Rich.
I do.
Who was a very, very, very good half-hour director and kind of a cranky old guy.
I'm working with his son Anthony now.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Anyway, we screened it for ABC. The ABC executives' lights come up, silence. And the president of ABC at that point was a guy named Lou Ehrlich. And he did not like Gary Nardino at all. And he didn't like Michael Eisner at all. And he said, this pilot, we're not even taking it to New York. We're not even going to consider it. And he's got one of his biggest stars on his network sitting right there. So Henry says, let's go to your office. Let's talk about this. So we went into his office. And Henry said, he said, what don't you like about it? He says, it's slow, it's boring. We like the lead character, and Henry and John said, let us cut it down to a 60-minute pilot. And Lou said, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. And then he turned to me and he said, you go back and tell Eisner, if you guys cut it to a 60-minute, I'm giving him 2/3 of what we committed to financially if you're only going to deliver us 60 minutes instead of 90. Whatever. So we cut it down to 60 minutes. And in doing so, we had to do a bunch of voiceover to connect the scenes because we cut so much stuff out of it. And they took the 60-minute pilot to New York. And
so the advertising upfronts are in New York every year in May.
Thank you. Yes. And every year when the networks are back there, the studio executives go back as well and do whatever we can to schmooze and try to find out information and just be available if the networks have any questions. So I'm sitting in my room and in a hotel, and I get a call from the vice president of ABC saying, MacGyver's got some heat. And I'm like, great. He said, but we don't know what the series is. We don't know where it's going. We need 22 storylines by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Wow.
It's about 7 p.m. I called down to the front desk and I had them send up an IBM Selectric and a 6-pack of Heineken. And I called my staff in LA and I said, guys, get to work and just start shooting me storylines. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to write them up. So I finished around midnight or 1 o'clock and had them copied and then had someone take them over and slide them underneath the doors at the ABC executives. And then the next day we got picked up to a series.
Wow. Let me ask you a quick question as a layman. What does a storyline consist of? What are we looking at? Like a paragraph or?
Yeah, it can be anything, Billy, and that's a very good question, but about 2 paragraphs, really.
So it's like when you read underneath the TV guide when they're telling you you're going to watch this movie. This is,
Oh, just slightly more than that. Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Because I'm wondering, you're churning these things out and you did it in 5 or 6 hours. I said, wow, that's powerful stuff. And then let me ask you another question. You started at Paramount pretty much looking at movies and reviewing them or getting the people to review them. But you made quite a leap in Paramount in a short amount of time, right? Within 10 years, we were.
Yeah, I was actually the youngest and least paid vice president, I think.
So it's very much like working in a bank. You get the title, but you don't get any money. Is that it?
Hey, that's yeah. But I had a good run, and like I said, I had a good relationship with the hierarchy there, with Gary Nardino and Michael Eisner and Diller, and it was a young man's business. I mean, it still is a young man's business.
Is it? Both of you guys? Is it a young man's business?
Well, it's no longer a young man's business; it's a young person's business.
Thank you.
No, seriously.
Yeah, I got
seriously. I'm in the Warner Brothers meetings now, and the majority of people in those meetings are females or people of color, and as it should be.
Yeah,
as it should be. So back to Nardino stories.
Well, he. I tell you, this story epitomizes. Well, 2 stories epitomize Gary, I think. One is we used to watch dailies on film, and so we had 2 theaters on the Paramount lot.
And dailies are the things that were shot the day before, scenes that were shot the day before. You look at them the next day, and that's called dailies. Correct.
Thank you, Frank. I'm leaping ahead as if everybody should know this stuff. But yes, so as a result, we always had a projectionist, Sal, on call, and Gary's family, his wife, lived in someplace in New York, and Gary was renting a house in Beverly Hills, and every Friday night, I can talk about him because he's passed away, I guess. But every Friday night, he would have dinner brought in from some restaurant in Beverly Hills or on Melrose, and have a movie screened, and he'd have an actress as his date, and that was every Friday night. Just the two of them.
One of the perks of success, I guess. There's nothing wrong. It's a small fault in a good man there, Grant. I don't see that as a bad thing.
It wasn't bad at all, but it typified Hollywood at that time, which was, let's call it early 1980s.
Well, I guess in the early 1950s, when Marilyn Monroe got her first big break, she said, "At last, I've sucked my last cock."
Which turned out to be another illusion. It didn't actually happen. I got it. My hat goes off to you because, geez, I guess you were in your mid-30s and you were like a high executive at Paramount. You seem to have handled success fairly well. If I couldn't even handle having a successful bar. I'm one of those guys that thinks Keith Richards looks good. Like, I think if I was in the Rolling Stones, I would have been dead 30 years ago. But you managed to treat success as, what is it the Romans say? Those whom the gods would destroy, they make successful young.
The gods are destroying this interview because I can't get Grant to follow the line of thought. So, I mean, not because Billy keeps interrupting with how successful you were. And I know we appreciate how successful you are, but I want to hear stories.
Okay, I'll shut up.
So,
since you just told that Marilyn Monroe joke or quote, that obviously answered one of my questions, which is how much censoring is going on here. Clearly not much.
Billy? With Billy?
I'm better now, Frank. I'm better.
So the other thing that epitomized Gary being the quintessential showman and salesman is when we shot pilots, it was during that May when we were presenting them to the studios. I'm sorry, to the networks. I got a call one day, 5 o'clock or so, and all of the ABC executives were in town, there in Century City, and it was from Gary's secretary saying, "Gary is going to have a party tonight, and he wants you to be there." It's like, okay. And it'll be at 10 o'clock at his house. I said, what are we doing? Just wants you at his house. It'll be for dessert, and the ABC executives will be there. All right. So I show up at his house at 10 o'clock, and there's valets there. And inside the house, there are the Paramount Television executives and the ABC television executives, and probably 20 actresses, and big trays of big tables laden with every dessert you could think of and bars. And it was basically,
advance your career.
I don't know, bacchanalia. I don't know if that's the And it was so successful that the next day, I got a call from the office again. It's like, there'll be another party tonight at 9 o'clock. And it was basically come on in and see if we could get the ABC executives laid.
Bring your sperm.
Yeah, bring your sperm. Exactly. Bring your own sperm.
That sort of typified him. That and the fact that he used to had a weekly card game, which to him was, he made it in Hollywood when he would put on this weekly card game. And I was invited a couple times, and it was Gary, it was Les Moonves, it was
president of CBS.
It was Bob Broder, who was one of the most powerful agents in town.
Right.
And it was Harris Cattleman, who was the president of 20th Century Fox. And it was catered. There weren't women at this one, but it was catered. But he wanted to create a thing, which was getting invited to this card game means you had made it. So this was his thing that he created, which was pretty smart.
Yep.
Yeah, a catered card game. Now, was that a high stakes game? I imagine it was.
Oh yeah.
It was a $200 buy-in.
That's small.
And there was one producer there named J.J. McMahon, who used to be president of NBC, and he kept the books. So he didn't take any money out of your pocket, but he kept the books, and then at the end of the night, you settled up. I'm a pretty good card player, and some of those guys aren't. So I used to do pretty well. But yeah, it'd be a swing of upwards to $1,000, maybe.
Yeah. So it wasn't really a high stakes game for those guys. It was penny ante.
A high stakes game, $1,000. If I lose $10 in a slot machine, I wear a black armband for a week.
Well, you still,
$1,000.
you still got your communion money. What are you kidding me?
I've got one envelope left. One envelope left, and 3 for my confirmation money. But
okay, I gotta ask a couple of questions because doing research on you was a gas. As a matter of fact, I'd love to see you write an autobiography. I'd love to see you do that because you've had a pretty wild ride here, pal. I got to say, tell me the story about Sinatra and Danny Thomas. I got to hear this story.
All right. So I'm a page at NBC. So I'm 22. And one of the jobs that they gave us working on the Academy Awards was you had a list of people that you were responsible for. And Danny Thomas was on my list. And responsible for meaning make sure you get him to stage on time. So the stage manager was a guy by the name of Garen Keith. I don't know if you ever worked with him, Frank.
I know the name.
Danny Thomas was the first presenter right after I think it was a Gallo wine commercial that came on right after the 1975 Academy Awards. First one up, Danny Thomas. He's nowhere to be found. So Garen Keith grabs me and he says, go find Danny Thomas now. You need to get his ass on stage in like 2 minutes. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm running around trying to find him. And someone says, he's in Sinatra's dressing room. I'm like, what? He's in Sinatra's dressing room. I'm like, oh my God. So I have to go down there. I knock on Sinatra's door. Sinatra opens the door and he's tucking his tuxedo shirt into his pants. His pants are down around his ankles. So he's about to tuck his shirt in. And he said, who are you? And I've got my Page jacket on. And I said, Grant Rosenberg, Page, is Mr. Thomas here? And Danny Thomas sticks his head around the corner and he says, what the fuck are you doing here? I said, you're due on stage. He said, I know, just get the fuck out of here. Boom, slams the door in my face. So I go back to the stage manager and I said, he's aware. I assume he's going to be there on time. That's the most I could do. He made it there on time. So 8 years later, one of the guys who works for me, his father was, so 8 years later, I'm the senior vice president of development at Paramount. And one of the guys who works for me, his father is a circuit court judge or something like that. Anyway, he is at a dinner and he's sitting at a table with Danny Thomas. He said, my boss tells the funniest story about you. He said, really? So Tony tells him this story about how he slammed the door in my face and told me to get the fuck out of Sinatra's dressing room. And he said, oh, what's that guy doing now? He said, oh, he's in charge of television at Paramount. He said, oh my God. So he's sending over this picture, this signed picture of himself saying, dear Grant, just kidding. Your friend Danny Thomas or something like that. So
wow, that's nice.
And I want to say, just so nobody gets the wrong impression, they had 2 girls in the room. There was 2 girls in the room, not the other thing that Grant alluded to.
Oh, no, not in the least.
No, that was an important part of the story, though. I would think.
Yeah, well, Grant said he opened the door. Sinatra has his pants down to his ankles, and Danny Thomas is in the other room. And, you could draw your own conclusions.
They could have been a doctor, Frank. Cough.
Yeah. He was tucking his pants, tucking his shirt in.
Yeah.
But so that was my run-in with both Danny Thomas and Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, there is a famous story about one of them that at a glass table. But I can't go into that right now.
No,
really.
That's that made the rounds at Paramount very much because I think he had an office there.
Well, I got to hear that story later. That's for sure.
Yeah, can you imagine what that story is if I
I got
won't
an idea.
if I won't tell it on even this
No,
podcast?
I can't imagine what it's like if you won't tell it on this point. But I'm going to have Grant tell me a story. Which you worked with Andy Kaufman. That had to have been a wild gig.
Andy Kaufman, as you may know, creative genius, strange, tortured guy, and he was on Taxi. And on Taxi, he played two roles. He played Latka Gravis, and then he played Tony Clifton.
Right.
Tony Clifton was like a Vegas lounge singer.
Obnoxious too. Obnoxious.
Oh yeah, he was a nasty man. Well, Andy had two dressing rooms. Well, let's put it this way: Andy Kaufman had a dressing room. Tony Clifton had a dressing room. And whenever you spoke to Andy about Tony, it was always in the third person. He never ever acknowledged, even to people on the show, that it was the same that he played both people.
Was that method acting on his part, or was he just schizophrenic, or was he just?
I think he was just fucking with everybody. I don't think it was schizophrenia. I think it was just this is my deal. This is who I am.
Andy being Andy.
Yeah, it's like, I saw him once at a comedy club, and after his set, he had a school bus outside, and he loaded everybody onto the school bus and took everybody to a diner to get milk and cookies. So,
wow,
tragic character.
Yeah.
It sounds well. You've often said that about people like Robin Williams. There's this thin line between genius and insanity, and some people cross the line.
Yeah.
Obviously,
all of them are damaged, with the exception of Don Rickles. And Don was the most normal of people I worked with. But even Don had a little bit of mama boy complex. But they all have, Robin Williams, everybody who has been successful in stand-up comedy is a little fucked up.
When I was a page, I worked on Welcome Back, Kotter, and it was the breakout, of course, for Freddie Prinze. And
Chico and the Man, you mean?
Chico and the Man, yes.
I'm sorry.
Welcome Back, Kotter was Travolta. I'm sorry. But Chico and the Man, and Freddie was brilliant, but he was a coke addict basically, and it didn't help that the executive producer Jimmy Comack was a coke head as well. And I'd never seen cocaine. I was young, and Freddie used to call me into his dressing room. He used to call me Jordan because he couldn't remember my name. He'd stick his head out in the hallway. Jordan, come here. And there's this thing that's about the size of a hardball. I was like, what is it? He goes, take some of this, I was like, no, I don't think so. But he'd come out of there flying high as a kite, man.
Well,
but he was on stage.
Yeah, but that's another thing we were talking about. But he was on top of the world at what age? Maybe 24, 25?
Well, he committed suicide at 24.
Yeah.
So he committed suicide at 24. So he was on top of the world at 20?
22, 23, yeah.
Yeah. Too much, too fast.
Yeah.
Didn't have an anchor, he just didn't have anybody to anchor him. It was sad.
Billy had an anchor, but it was
it was in the bottom of the ocean.
It was in the bottom of the ocean.
You got to swim there to get there. But you also worked on Welcome Back, Kotter. Tell us a couple of Travolta stories there, or your experiences with Travolta.
Well, he was a very nice guy. The weird thing about
nice being the operative word.
Yeah. He was a good guy. Mm-hmm. He was young. He was just starting out. But the weird thing was we shot Kotter the same night that it aired. Like if it aired on a Thursday night, we happened to tape on a Thursday night. It wasn't the same episode, obviously. We weren't shooting live. But people would call the studio because they thought that John was there because they were watching the show. So he would get calls from women or girls all around the country. And I was working the phones on that show, and I would get 20, 30 messages for Travolta, and he'd come off stage. And I'd say, "You've got messages from this girl in Cincinnati," and say, "Oh, yeah. That was really it. It was just sort of funny, though, that, he was such a star on that show, and Gabe Kaplan was a stand-up comedian. He was the lead, but he wasn't the heartthrob. He wasn't the thing that made that show go.
Yeah, well, like head of the class, Howard Hessman was the titular star, but
Right.
the kids became the star after probably 2 or 3 episodes, and Howard never really aligned himself to that because he had always wanted to be the star, and he was relegated to second class.
Man, that's a train that's hard to get on. Just get on the train and go for the ride, man.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Do you guys see that? Both of you guys, when you see like a sitcom or a show that's starting out, is it inevitable that one personality is going to move to the top of that
Well,
conglomerate?
I'm going to answer for Grant. I would say not really, because I don't think that Happy Days thought that Henry Winkler would be the star of the show. He was sort of just a guest star, an afterthought.
Right.
Ron Howard had an older brother who they replaced after the end of the first season, and
Well, they didn't replace him.
well,
He went away.
yeah, he went away after the end of the first season, and he was not so much replaced by Henry Winkler, but at that point, Henry Winkler had taken his job. In Family Matters, Urkel was not cast as the main star; he was a guest star. In Boy Meets World, Danielle told us she was a guest star. She was not even
But
cast as
all
Topanga.
3 of those people you mentioned sort of took over the show. They became the central driving force of the show. Do you guys find that as an anomaly, or is that the way it usually is?
No, I don't think. Actually, I mean that's a great question. I don't think, Billy, it's actually either. It just depends on the dynamics of the show, and if you happen to accidentally catch, as they say in casting, lightning in a bottle with a Henry Winkler or somebody like that, then yeah, that person's going to rise to the top. But more often, what you have is you can cast somebody in a lead, and they are not satisfied. They don't end up doing the work to make it a hit because they want more and they want more. I did a show in Canada called 13, and it was a bad ripoff of Bourne Identity, but that's what it was. But we cast Stuart Townsend in the lead. And Stuart Townsend had done some features. His claim to fame was he was living with Charlize Theron.
That's not a bad claim to fame.
Yeah, not bad. But he was the lead, and he was never happy. I mean, here he is, cast, getting paid very well, cast in the lead of a series. It wasn't the toughest work in the world, but every day it was like, can I have fewer lines? Can I work less? Can I get off on Friday? We cast Aisha Tyler to be opposite him, and he lost his shit because she's 3 inches taller than he is. And he insisted that she never wear heels. And, we said that we would lay down planks for him. We would put down apple boxes, which are little risers. And he said, fuck that. How can you cast someone who's taller than me? It's just like you're losing focus on what we're doing here. You're the lead in an action series.
Jeez.
Look at all the money you could possibly need. And how can you just piss this away because you're unhappy and you don't want to do the work? That to me is a bigger problem.
Well, does that come from, Grant? Sometimes the actors who wait so long to get their break, they feel entitled because they've ate shit for 15 or 20 years, and they figured now it's their time to be the star. And a lot of them changed. Do you think that's the reason why?
I think that's contributes to it. Yes, I think that the other thing is actors, and I'm married to an actress, so I know, but they different DNA, man. It's actors have a different outlook. Many of them a different outlook on what they do and on their life, and it's they just carry a lot of baggage.
Yeah, well, Frank, it's often mentioned that stand-up comics are tragically flawed, and I did a little stand-up comedy when I got out of college, and a lot of the comics I run into.
Wait a second. When I got out of college, you say that like you were 22 years old.
Well, when I got out of college,
I did a little stand-up.
I was the darling in the nursing homes, Frank. The darling in the nursing homes.
When I got out of college.
I had the captive audiences, wake up. I'm telling jokes up here.
When Grant got out of college, he was a UC Davis soccer player.
All right.
When I got out of college, I was a Jacksonville University soccer player. When you got out of college, you were a septuagenarian or whatever a 60 is.
But my point is, a lot of stand-up comics do self-depreciating jokes, You see a lot of heavyweights.
Self-deprecating jokes, not depreciating jokes.
Depreciating.
Self-deprecating.
I can write it. I can't say it. But anyway, they do a lot. You see a lot of heavyweight guys do jokes, but, guys will do jokes about their religion. They'll do jokes about their upbringing. It becomes because they're flawed. Do you think it's the same thing with actors? Do you think that they get this ego problem because they're flawed characters to begin with?
Not necessarily. I think they've got fragile egos. I mean,
but it's interesting because it's egomaniacs with fragile egos.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much with comics. I see egomaniacs with fragile egos. You could tell a comic that you just banged his mother, and he wouldn't say a word. You tell him he's not funny, and you've got an enemy for life.
Yeah.
Well, when you consider how many actors and actors/actresses there are who are competing, we were talking about, the competition to sell a project and get it on the air. That's nothing compared to the number of actors who go up for casting sessions and are faced with daily rejection.
Right.
And it's personal. Even though it's not personal, it feels personal. And that's tough, man. I've sat in hundreds of casting meetings, and I generally feel sorry for the folks that are coming in.
As do I.
Because, sometimes you lose track of the fact, because we're seeing 30 people that day. You lose track of the fact that those people are at home the day before. What do I wear? How do I remember these lines? Should I use an accent? Should I not use an accent? This could be my big break. If I get this, I could get a new apartment. I could buy a car. I mean, to them, it's a big deal. To us, it's like you're just one of 30 people coming in. And it's really good to try to keep perspective when you're a person on the other side of that desk, too.
Yep. I always remember my friend Tony O'Dell, who was a successful actor. He was starring ahead of the class and had been in Cobra Kai, whatever the movie was, the original Cobra Kai movie. He couldn't get a job for like 2 or 3 or 4 years. And he was getting desperate. And I said, Tony, you got to relax. You can't feel like you've been to the top once. You can't be trying to get to the top. All right, you just got to relax. You got to say, doesn't make any difference. I'll go in and I'll try to do it. And he did that, and he still didn't get work, but he felt a lot better about himself.
Well, Frank makes a point in the book, in Lips, If These Lips Could Talk.
Available on Amazon.
Available on Amazon, along with Gideon. Thank you very much. But he makes a point in saying that sometimes, and you've been on the right side of this equation, a casting director doesn't really know what he's looking for. He leaves it up to the actor to show them what he's looking for. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, I think so. I mean, the casting directors, the ones who are doing series, they just throw out sort of a wide net, and they don't always give the actors enough information for the actors to make choices, the right choices. So for me, the most successful casting sessions are when someone comes in, A, they're familiar with the material, so they're not having to read it, and B, they're relaxed, which was easier said than done. And then let me or let the director, who is usually in the room with me, guide them, but not to come in having made, I'm going to read this with a hard Bronx accent. And it's like, not what we're looking for, but, well done making a choice and sticking with it, but because they try to stand out.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, different perspectives. I was just curious about that because
I learned, I don't want to say just the opposite, but Howard Morris taught me in casting sessions, you try to you assume that a good actor can make changes, can make adjustments. So, so let me see what you believe in. And then the first time, and the second time, I'll give you an adjustment and I'll see whether you can make it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
You were talking before about demanding actors and how they don't realize, they do or do not realize how good they got it. And it's kind of mind-boggling that they would give up everything for some petty shit. When I was doing research on you about Lois and Clark, you mentioned Terry Hatcher was pissed off about being on television. What does that even mean? Why wouldn't you be jumping rope naked and delighted to be on television?
Well, she started out being delighted, but then a friend of Frank's was in a movie. Wait a minute. I have to look this up now. Who was the actress that you worked with on Suddenly Susan? Not
Brooke Shields?
Not Brooke Shields.
Kathy Griffin?
Kathy Griffin.
Oh, gosh, no, not Kathy.
Andrea Bendewald? Barbara Barry?
Wait a minute.
Andrea Bendewald, Barbara Barry? Kathy Griffin was the original Polly-O.
All right, never mind. I got it. I led you astray.
Okay.
Terry was doing fine until Sandra Bullock became
a movie star.
Okay. Because Terry and Sandra used to go up for the same roles. In her mind, they were always competing for the same job. And when Sandra Bullock became a huge movie star, Terry was like, I want to be a movie star. So she was unhappy the majority of the time. And she got kind of a bum rap. I mean, she really created a situation for herself that she made people around her unpleasant. I got along with her fine. I wrote a script once. I got a call to come into her trailer. And she said, you know what? I got a problem with this script. I said, what's the problem? She said, you give Clark all the good investigative beats. Clark can fucking fly. I don't fly. So you need to give me the good investigative beats and let him fly. And I said, well, what happens when I rewrite the script and Dean has notes? She goes, that's your problem, not mine.
Whoa.
And she was right. She was right. But go to season 4, the last season of the series, and ABC insists that we have Lois and Clark get married, and it destroyed the show. Yeah. So the show gets picked up for season 5. The president of Warner Brothers Television is a guy by the name of Tony Jonas. And Tony invites, and I'm not there, so this is all secondhand, but Tony invites Dean and Terry. Sorry, I'll turn my phone off.
Okay.
Tony invites. We were looking at each other.
I was looking at Billy. Billy was looking at Derek.
You're okay. You get away with anything. You're the guest. I was getting a bad, dirty look. I was getting the piece of shit that won't flush look. Like.
If you're on a set and your phone goes off, the worst. Especially if you're an executive producer. So Tony brings in Dean and Terry and the executive producers. And he's got 2 big screen TV sets with bows on them. And he's got champagne. And he says, congratulations, the network picked up the show for season 5. And Terry got up and ran out of the room. He didn't want to do the show anymore.
Unbelievable.
That's funny.
So they go outside and they talk to her. And she sort of sullenly comes back in, and Tony says, "Call your agents. You guys are up for an increase in pay and everything." Anyway, what happened at the end of the day was she said, I'm not going to take the stunts from set. I'm just not going to take it. So Dean says, "Well, fuck, it's cool. I'll take them both." Tony's, no. So anyway, Dean takes his TV set home. Terry leaves her TV set there. They move it into a conference room. And about a month goes by, and Tony calls up Terry's agent and says, she's got this television set. Does she want to donate it to a women's shelter? What does she want to do with it? The agent says, "I'll call you back." She calls back a little while later, and she says instead of a TV set, she would like a diamond tennis bracelet instead.
That's unbelievable.
Yep.
And then the end of the story is ABC changes their mind and they say, "You know what? We're not picking up season 5.
Wow.
So it never went forward anyway.
Well, I'll tell you a quick my Superman story. It has really nothing to do with yours, only peripherally. But when Steve Papazian, our good friend, had left the Warner Brothers to go to Universal, Andy Ackerman shortly thereafter took over as head of production. Andy said to me, you've got a reputation as a guy who brings a show in under budget. I just want you to know, spend every penny you have, because I don't want anybody to think Superman could have flown one more time if we had spent that money. So don't save it. Spend it on let Superman fly.
You know what? I had the same experience. The one movie that I made for Warner Brothers was a little slasher movie with Denise Richards and David Boreanaz called Valentine. And we shot it in Canada for, I want to say, $12.5, $13 million. And we were very, very efficient. And we would report every day to our mutual friend, Mark Schoon, who was in charge of Warner's features. He was a vice president of production. And we ended up coming in about, I don't know, $200,000-$300,000 light. I mean, save $200,000-$300,000. Well, Mark would call us and say, "You got to spend that money." We went to management and with our budget, and we don't want to leave anything behind here. We don't want to get accused that we didn't give the director a crane whenever he wanted it. We didn't do a wet down on night streets, that anything was lacking. We wanted to spend every penny of this. So we ended up figuring out ways to spend the rest of this money. And we screened the movie and for Warner Brothers, and Kelly McCormick, who was one of the vice presidents of development, or on the development side, said, "Oh, it's a nice movie. So how much did you spend?" I said, $12.5 million. He said, "Oh, we just did a big budget movie, and they came in, they saved $2 or $3 million. I'm surprised you guys couldn't save some money on your shoot."
Yeah, but that's the reason why producers don't get financial incentives in the budget, because they would say if you come in under budget, you were just coming in under budget to save money to get your piece of the action.
They thought it would reflect on the product, the final product.
Yeah. You would cheap
It's
out.
almost like the military.
Yeah.
They do the same thing. If the Air Force doesn't spend X amount of dollars, they don't get X amount of dollars next year.
Yeah.
And they have to, that's where you get the $500 hammers and the $800
Well,
swords.
yes and no, but if you don't get the $500 hammer because you're trying to put the savings in your pocket as a producer, that's a problem.
That's a problem. I can see how that would be.
So, Grant, before you go,
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us what it was like living next door to Kevin Costner?
Yeah, the good segue. I appreciate that. When we bought our house in La Cañada, we found out that there was an actor living next door, and it was this guy who had a small part in Silverado. And it was like, Kevin Costner. I'm like, I love this guy. I love him in Silverado. I think that was the only thing that I had seen him in at that point.
Had he not been cut out of Dances with Wolves, Big Chill yet?
Yeah, he had.
He was in the Big Chill and got cut out.
He was the corpse at the beginning,
Wow.
and they cut him out of it because they had to tell more story, make story.
Oh, I had no idea.
So
That's a great story.
You just saw his tuxedo, him in a tuxedo being dressed in the main title, but he was not in it actually.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's a great story. So go ahead.
So anyway, he was, I hadn't met him because he was in Chicago doing Untouchables. But so anyway, he moved back in. We shared a fence. He was right next door. Very, very, he grew up in Southern California. Fullerton, right? Baseball player, and he was just that guy, just the most normal, nicest guy. And we would get together and play over the line and drink beers, and he would go away and do a movie and come back. And anyway, one day he called me and said, I got a book that I'm thinking about optioning. Can you come on over and I'll give you a copy of it? And I'd like you to read it. It was this thick book by, I think his name was Michael Blake, and it was Dances with Wolves. So I kind of speed read it over the weekend. I go back and I meet with him, and I said, what are you thinking about? He said, I want to make this my next movie. I said, well, I can see you doing a Western, but the cowboys are the bad guys. You sure this is the movie that you want to do? He said, not only do I want to do it, I want to direct it. I said, you're insane.
Wow.
You want to direct a movie, do another baseball movie. I mean, do something small. He said, no, this is what I want to direct. I said, I think you're biting off, and he'd never directed before. I said, I think you're biting off way too much here. You've got buffalo, you've got horses, you've got dress extras. This is going to be massive. I know. So they set the movie up at Orion. Orion comes back, and Kevin's like, this is the movie I want to do. Orion's not going to cover all of the financing for it. So Kevin's going to put up a couple million of his own money. And I go over and talk to him again. I said, you are making a huge mistake here. You're paying to direct this movie, which I don't even think conceptually works. Well, this is what I'm going to do. And in exchange for him putting up the rest of the money, he got a big chunk of the back end. I think he got a lot of foreign. So they're shooting the movie, and Kevin's in North Dakota, I think. And I get a call from his wife, from Cindy, and she said, can you come over? I want to talk to you for a minute. So she's looking at dailies. Again, this is what they shot during the day, and these are now on tape, and they're sending him back. And here's Kevin riding his horse in a buffalo herd with a gun. And she said, if he falls off this horse, girls don't have a father. I mean, my kids don't have a father. We're broke. This is insane. I said, I don't even know what to tell you. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. He's taking way too many chances. Next part of the story, they're done with the movie and they're cutting it, and it's about 3 hours and 20 minutes long. And Kevin has Final Cut. And he shows the movie to Orion, and Orion wants to cut it down, wants to cut an hour out of it. And he said, it's bullshit. I'm not cutting it. I'm not cutting an hour out of it. Maybe I'll get it down to 3 hours. And I said, you have to understand, if it's longer than 3 hours, you're going to miss a run at the theater, because they're only going to be able to run the movie at 7 and at 10 instead of at 6, 8, 10, and 12. You know what I mean? I said, you're cutting off your knees here. He said, no, this is the way I want to do it. So every step along the way, he is making every decision that, in my mind, is completely wrong. So at the Academy Awards, it wins 7 Academy Awards. He wins Best Picture. He wins Best Director. He owns the back end of this movie, which is worth tens and tens of millions of dollars. That's my Kevin Costner story.
Wow.
Supposed to show you, nobody knows anything in this town, man.
Yeah. That's a great illustration.
It's pure luck. I got one more thing I want to say, but before I say it, Derek, do you have any questions for Grant? Billy, you have any question for Grant?
No, just to say that Costa story topped off a really, really good interview. That was really enjoyed listening to your stories, brother. You're a natural born storyteller.
Well, Grant, I just want to say it's 2020, 2021. Our relationship goes back to 1990, 91 or so, when you were executive producing a show called Malloy with a young actress by the name of Mayim Bialik. I'm working now at Warner Brothers again, and one show I'm assigned to is Call Me Kat, starring the same aforementioned Mayim Bialik. And our first Zoom production meeting, she said, "Frank, how are you?" And
I love that.
That was a really great story.
And another young actress named Jennifer
Aniston, who I had worked with before on Ferris Bueller.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Well, Grant's given me a great idea. Since I got the two of you here, I want to pitch a story that I'm working on. It's called Dancing with Mix. I'm thinking perhaps you guys would get behind it.
Well, clearly, I'm the wrong guy to talk to.
Well, I think that if we did, it would have to be Dancing with Mex.
I see.
Not Mix.
We got to be politically correct.
That's correct. All right, Grant. Thanks so much. Anything else you want to say? Any book you want to plug?
Yeah. How about that?
This is not a bad read, fellas.
This is a good read.
It's a fine read and a nice twist in the middle of the book instead of at the end.
And I got a feeling there's going to be a sequel.
I am just about done with the sequel, and you will be very one little nod in your direction is a couple of kids are watching Shake It Up. They're talking about how hot this actress Zendaya is.
Great. And I believe there's a character named Frank Pace in there, isn't there?
There is.
Is he cheerful?
Oh, Derek finally woke up. Nope.
The problem with Frank Pace is he's just too nice.
He's too nice. He'll never make it in this business.
On that,
and yet you made it in this business, which will tell you.
On that, get the fuck off, Grant.
All right, guys, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Grant.
You've been a great guest.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, pal.
Pleasure. Good to see you.
Good to see you. That was great.
Yep. How about that?
Yeah, great story with. I didn't know that Costner was in the Big Chill. No, I had no idea.
Yep.
And he was really, really good in that Western. That was a great Western, by the way.
Silverado. Yep.
Yeah, it was a really good Western. And Costner still did sort of steal the show. And there was some heavyweights in that movie.
Yep.
You know, and he did sort of steal the show. He made a big imprint. And the next role was The Untouchables, huh?
Yep.
And that's all history after that.
Well, I don't know if it was next role because he made some baseball movies, some pretty good baseball movies in between
it was Bull
there.
Durham, right? Was that
Bull Durham? There was another one also.
Dancing with Mix.
that was.
You don't want to do that one.
Dancing with Mix and Roger. Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris.
I can't catch a break here, Derek. I thought this was my big opportunity. I thought I was going to get a
So
here.
Grant gave me our next. Who's Fredo?
Who's Fredo? I'm smart. What's the matter with me? I'm the oldest. I overlook me.
Okay, so I was thinking we were talking about situation comedies. Who's the Fredo in the cast of Friends?
Oh, yeah. I got to go with Schwimmer right off the bat. Did you write that, Schwimmer?
Schwimmer.
Oh, yeah. Right off the bat. He made the O.J. Simpson movie, and I didn't even watch it because he was in it. I said, I ain't watching this guy as a lawyer.
We've never had this discussion.
No,
we have never had this discussion. But that's the main reason I didn't watch the O.J. Simpson movie, because of Schwimmer.
Really?
Absolutely.
As soon as I saw he was in it, I said, what is this garbage? This guy's in it. Yeah, Schwimmer, definitely.
And I was going to say, you would say the other guy, who was the mook in Friends?
Matt LeBlanc.
Matt LeBlanc.
Yeah.
I thought you would say Matt LeBlanc.
Schwimmer, come right to mind. He's afraid of what
I'm smart.
I'm smart. Why overlook me? I was the older brother. How do you think that made me feel?
Oh,
Schwimmer. Yeah, definitely. That's a good catch. We didn't talk about this.
we didn't talk about.
Well, you had it written down.
I had it written down. I was going to ask Grant. But I said, nah, I'll just save it for Billy.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt.
Oh,
Schwimmer.
that's funny.
Yeah, he's a mook.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to top that. I
No,
think we'll just say goodnight.
Good night, folks. Don't forget, if these lips could talk, don't forget to look at a Mick, a Mook, and a Mike on YouTube or
Facebook, Spotify, if you want to listen to these
Spotify, if you want to listen to
genius words, these words of wisdom.
And think about that. Anybody out there in Hollywood land, think about Dancing with Mix. I think we got something here.
We got something indeed. Thank you, folks. Good night.
Good night.